So if we're pitching a student athlete and the brand goes on their social and it does not align with their values, we've absolutely been turned down. We're like, hey, we don't like the way he posted X or that. It doesn't align with our brand and our missions and our values. What you post matters. Because you're now a student athlete, you walk around Westwood, San Diego, Nashville, enter any of my schools, you're recognizable. But we've been teaching brand strategy and brand integrity on social media for our student athletes for so long. Now we're teaching it tied to dollars.
Welcome to the table. You're tuned into the Academic Boardroom with Dr. J and Dr. E. Pull up a chair. Higher learning, higher stakes.
Welcome back to the Academic Boardroom, a podcast where we sit down with power brokers shaping the future of education. I'm your host, Dr. Eli Joseph, and joining me is my colleague and partner in crime, Dr. Janice Gassam Asare. Today, we have a special guest, Erin Adkins of UCLA. Erin is UCLA's Executive Senior Associate Athletics Director for NIL Strategy. She leads the charge on name, image, and likeness operations, ensuring student athletes are positioned for success in this new era of collegiate sports. With a deep background in NCAA compliance at Vanderbilt and the University of San Diego, Erin now serves as the sport administrator for UCLA football and women's soccer. Erin, welcome to the boardroom.
Thank you, guys. I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited myself. It's an honor because when I reached out to you and, I didn't anticipate you saying, yeah, I'm down. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
The first thing we want to know is, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Really fortunate. We're having a great winter. I just came back from Phoenix with our women's basketball team, we were lucky enough to win the national championship in women's basketball, which is, it's a surreal career moment. I mean, we are loaded with riches at UCLA. In my 8 years here, I've now seen 10 national championships, probably across 6 different sports. So I've seen it, but I haven't seen it at the basketball level at any point in my career. I mean, we have 126 national championships at UCLA. So we are not, it doesn't come as a surprise when we win championships, but it is our first in the modern era of the NCAA to win a women's basketball championship. And at that level, at that scale, what the Final Four looks like, I mean, even even at that point, you're kind of like, wow, did that just happen? And so we are on a high. We have a celebration tonight in Pauley Pavilion. We have their banquet tomorrow. Like, you're catching us on a great week. I also have oversight of our baseball program. They're number one in the Q3, 25 plus in a row. So, we're having a great winter, and we're going to keep it rolling throughout this new spring now.
I wanted to dive in. For the listeners, I wanted you to break down the concept and the principles of NIL. What is it, and how important is it now that we are in this new era of sports athletics in college?
Yeah, it's a passion of mine. I'm probably very similar to many students that went to law school. When I was in law school, whenever 15 plus years ago, in my 3L year, I tried to specialize in contract, sports, and entertainment. And, my thesis, for lack of better words, was really titled, should college athletes be paid? So, I've been looking at this for 15 years, starting back with law school before I even had a full-time collegiate job, and to oversee compliance at 3 different institutions, and to now be at an institution leading this charge during what is undoubtedly the most transformative time in the history of college athletics. It's pretty surreal, and it's energized my career. The last 5 years have been transformative, just that. From 2020, coming out of COVID and getting name, image, and likeness, and the ability for our student athletes, to the House settlement, and to now revenue share, where the institutions are actually also paying the student athletes themselves. Like, this growth in the last 5 years is coming at a rate we've never seen. For years, decades, the NCAA kind of moved at a slow pace, and now it's like, oh my gosh, every 3 months we're getting hit with needing to be flexible and working through all of the infrastructures that come along with this. So So it's been pretty fun to track it. But for us, name, image, and likeness is the ability and the right for the student athletes to maximize and profit over their own brand, right? For any other non-collegiate athlete, for the history of whatever it looks like, they've been able to profit off of their NIL. It's your NIL is just that. It's yours. It's your right. It's your name. It's your image. It's your likeness. It's your complete brand. And so for the history of the NCAA, student athletes have never been able to do that. I remember my first 3 years at UCLA, because we're in Los Angeles, I had student athletes that wanted to model, that wanted to start their own business, that wanted a music career, that wanted to just be shown in a music video. All of those things required a waiver to the NCAA because they were not permitted under NCAA rule. They had nothing to do with their sport. I want to start a clothing brand. Didn't have anything to do with his or her sport, but he was going to use his name to promote the brand, and he couldn't do that. It wasn't even an athletic brand. I had a student athlete that wanted to start a music career. She would have promoted her music with her name. She couldn't do that. So even past, prior to 2020, 2021, they couldn't even use their name to promote non-athletic entities, brands, or things that they created. And so, we've been fighting for this even pre-NIL. And so, when it happened and we finally got it, and we're lucky enough to be in California, people may forget, but California started this whole thing. It started with a state law, and then a couple more state laws kind of applied the pressure, and it moved up the timeline really fast. So we've been on this. We've been up in Sacramento. We've been to the state legislature. Like, we've been tracking this since long before 2021. And so, what it means is everything. It's their right to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. What it also means is you have to educate them that it's your right. So you can't infringe on others' rights. And a lot of times that means you can't infringe on the trademarks and the licensing and your teammates. So you have to keep them also in their space and then teach them what that all means. But in its basic form, it's their ability to maximize and profit off of who they are and what they are building and or creating. And it gives them the ability to promote themselves, promote other businesses, third-party relationships. So it's an awesome environment, and it's the right that everybody else has always had, just the collegiate student athlete had not had prior to 21.
So I have a question. As somebody who's not a big sports person, but I'm really fascinated by the name, image, likeness, the whole thing. I'm also really fascinated by, like, how do you also have to educate students on how to conduct themselves on social media? Because I hear a lot of stories of students doing these things or behaving badly outside of, the classroom setting, and how that can impact them and their career and their athletic career. So do you also, as part of what you do, or as part of the preparation for the student athletes, also involve kind of like helping them understand social media and how what they post on social media or what they say or what they do outside of the college context can impact them and impact their careers? Have you seen that as being part of what, you'll have to educate the students on in this era?
I mean, it starts and stops with that. Brand strategy and how you present yourself is the beginning, because your followers and your content is what equals dollars, right? Like, marketing companies are spending money in the social space. Like, that's just what we're seeing, right? Like, the old days of even like commercials and radio and billboards, like this old idea of marketing, like, you're seeing it all through social media and through authentic marketing deals. So it starts and stops with social, and brand integrity is real. So if we're pitching a student athlete and the brand goes on their social and it does not align with their values, we've absolutely been turned down. We're like, hey, we don't like the way he posted X or that. It doesn't align with our brand and our missions and our values. So 100%. What I will say is we've been teaching brand value and brand integrity of the student athlete since I was started. I remember, every year, whether I was in compliance or a sport administrator, you give a speech at the beginning of the year to the student athletes. 10, 15 years ago, I was telling them what you post matters. Because you're now a student athlete, you walk around Westwood, San Diego, Nashville, enter any of my schools, you're recognizable. For those cities and that in your community, you are a public figure. So your brand matters. And if you don't want grandma or mom to see it, even if you're private, like, you have to understand that. And you can, and you have to own your own brand. And if you're going to do stuff, that's fine. But we've been teaching brand strategy and brand integrity on social media for our student athletes for so long. Now we're teaching it tied to dollars, right? Before it was like, do you want mom, pop, coach, grandma to see this, right? It was always like future, the last 10 years has been about like, it's also social is also your resume. Like, you know, jobs and people can say what they want, but it's you're going to be looking on people's social just to get a vibe of who they are, right? So it's always been about that. Now it's a real big point of impact, and it's acute because it could equal and it will equal dollars, right? And so then it's like there's a little bit more emphasis behind it. So yes, we've brought in Instagram, we've brought in Meta, we've brought in Facebook, we've taken our student athletes to the TikTok workshops. Like it's a massive part of their career development now. Your social is your resume. So it also introduces you to the world, but it also introduces you to brand deals that equate to pretty large, significant funds.
I wanted to ask you this question here. I mean, you've been around for a long time, and I wanted to ask you the difference between a Big Ten school, which is now what UCLA is, the conference that UCLA is playing under, and the SEC, which I think Vandy is also a member of as well. Is there a big difference in terms of how funds are being allocated or how the athletes are being treated, or is it pretty much all the same under?
No, I mean, to me, and I've been at in both those conferences, so it's easy for me to say it, but I truly believe it. Big Ten and SEC are setting the market. I just really do believe it. You see it in their media deals. You see what they're doing. You see it when the way they win championships. But I believe that the Big Ten is equal to the SEC, and the SEC is equal to the Big Ten. I think that they are setting the market, and they are the ones that everybody is chasing. So I wouldn't say there's a massive difference between the two. I think the analyzing comes between those two and the other conferences. But I would say I believe it's pretty parallel and pretty similar. I mean, we're pretty fortunate in the Big Ten. I mean, the Big Ten has now won football, men's and women's basketball all in the same calendar year. So you're coming off of the Big Ten's most successful year, and we're 2/3 of the way through, but they just won 3 of 3 of the revenue sports and the kind of crown jewel of the 3 national championships. So, I mean, those are just facts at this point, and we're honored at UCLA to have one of those.
I also want to jump in and ask, after a win, like a championship win, does the budget increase, or it may be a rhetorical question, but do you think, what happens to the opportunities, the revenue, the profits? What happens to a program like the women's basketball program after a big win over the weekend?
I mean, every year budget increases, and you just got to hope revenue increases, right? I mean, exposures equals dollars, right? So the biggest thing is with women's basketball is exposure, right? Our hope is, as this team was just crushing, right? They had 35 straight wins. They were, they only lost 1 game early in the season, so they were climbing. And so, I was watching our young student athletes on Jimmy Kimmel last night, and he kind of asked them that question of our women's basketball team. And our seniors kind of said the same thing. They were like, it's crazy the impact that our class has had. Like thinking about our gym, our freshman and sophomore year versus this year, they're multiplied butts and seats. And for us, that's always going to be great dollars because that's exposure. Winning creates revenue opportunities because it brings in more brands. It brings in more ticket sales. And so it was honestly so cool to hear our women's basketball student athletes say that on national TV last night. Like, we've seen the growth in women's sports just in the 4 years we've been at UCLA. And obviously their development and their competition and their level, when you're number one, people want to see the show. So winning always equals revenues because more people are going to get in the seats, more brands are going to jump in, more corporate sponsors. So it always does. And we're all human. Winning also makes you look at your boss and say, hey, I'm pretty cool, right? You want to keep me, right? They want me. You want me. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where you just kind of like on the flight home, you're like, okay, let's have some fun now, right? And that's just the reality. And then we're in a competition world. These coaches they are game changers, they are educators, they are mentors. But at the end of the day, they're judged on wins and losses. Like, that's their column. So when you get to the mountaintop, there's always going to be conversation. Like, what does this mean? How can we increase? Because then the goal is, how do you stay there? And to stay there in today's world, that's dollars.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to that. Again, as somebody who I come from Virginia, we don't have sports teams like that. So the college where I went to school basketball was our big thing. We didn't have a football team. It was Virginia Commonwealth University. And
I
after
see.
I graduated, we went to the Final Four, which was like a huge thing. It was 2011, and I was in grad school. I drove down. We didn't end up winning. And that's when Shaka Smart was our coach. And he's now moved on. But what I noticed when I came back to campus, after I had graduated, is how much the campus changed after the win. So I'm so curious, like, what is the morale like on a college campus when there is a huge win like this? I know this is still fresh,
Yeah.
but when there is a huge win like this, or for, students at these universities where there are a lot of wins and there's a lot of success, how does that impact the students, the morale, and the overall vibe on the campus?
I mean, you could see it, like, you could look this up and it's data points, and it's a little different at UCLA because it
Gotta
is
win.
different here. We're already the number one most
Yeah.
applied to school, so it's not gonna move that needle because it's already the number. But, like, there are real data points. When a team makes the Final Four or is like a just crushing in the NCAA tournament, or they win a football championship, like, there's data that shows, like, applications rise, right? Like, because it's exposure. You're sitting in California, you see a team like VCU win, you're like, "What's VCU? Let me look. Oh, I can go to college there." So, like, the exposure is huge. So I think on most campuses, the offset is you see a jump in applications, like, for sure, right? And so that's huge, but it's community. Like, for us at UCLA, like, we're at such a high institution that values so much, right? We are at number one, number two public institution in the country. It's the four letters mean so much. And so we work extra hard to continue to show, like, look how well we can be a part of this community. And we do it with the winning the 126 national championships. But I mean, just looking at your phone after the women's basketball game, like looking at, who on campus is just like so excited for this, like so many partners that you work with to see them invested, like from our general counsel's office telling me, like, I was watching it crying, to, our chancellor being at the game, to, LA Mayor Karen Bass wanting to meet with the student athletes, to them being asked to come up to Sacramento to meet with state legislators. Like, this, even just in the past 48 hours, like, it's been
President Obama.
Obama,
Yeah.
it's just like Kamala Harris this week, like, it's unreal. And so at a place like UCLA, where you can't take it for granted because you're so on the mountaintop from an academic position, it's so cool to be reminded that, like, no, everybody understands the value of what athletics does, because if you do it right, it should still be the number one marketing tool. Right? It's like that impression of being on, I think we were on CBS or at ABC, on Sunday, like, that's a huge amount of eyeballs with the four letters. And so you can't understate it. And it just, you can see the videos when the bus came in at 9:30 at night, the loading dock was packed and it was students. And it's just like, it's instant. You just feel a connection. I'm sure you felt that way, right? You were gone at VCU, but you were like, I'm in it, like, there's something so special about, like, a collegiate allegiance and alliance that you don't really get when you're rooting for your pro team, and so that's to me why, like, the academic experience is always going to be tied to the athletic collegiate experience, because, like, it's a fanhood like no other.
As far as and I know you're also involved with the Rose Bowl. And at UCLA, I'm assuming we host the Rose Bowl pretty frequently. I always wonder the changes. I know that, in athletics, especially in college athletics, the changes every 6 months or so.
Oh, it absolutely makes a difference. Like, we college athletics is facing so many external factors, right? You have multiple different state laws. You've lost uniformity. I mean, we've lost sometimes the ability to enforce our own rules. You've got lawsuits, piling up related to eligibility and how you enforce the existence of the rules. So, like, we are at a inflection point where we need something to come together, and whether it's the EO through the executive order or a strategic plan that gets us through these next 5 years, like we all really need to take a look at how do we is saving college athletics. This sounds a little bit more dire than it needs to be, but no, I mean, we're absolutely at a point where we need to buckle down, 10 toes down, and figure out, okay, what does this model look like to be successful? And whether it's UCLA, VCU, University of San Diego, or UC Santa Barbara, that doesn't have, like we're all feeling this pressure. we are all feeling this pressure due to like the, lack of uniformity in our rules and lack of the ability to enforce our rules. So the EO, it's one step towards that. It's one step towards that, and we're still learning about it. It's pretty fresh, but we are at a time where we need all hands on deck to build a strategy of how we can make this thing last, because we are not immune to it at UCLA. The Big Ten's not immune to it, just like any other colleges. Like, to make college athletics last, we got to figure out what this looks like 10, 15 years from now, because that's really important right now.
Also, I also want to dive in this topic as well. There's a debate that I watched with, I believe it was John Calipari, Jay Williams on ESPN, and they were discussing whether or not we should still call college athletes amateurs. And it seemed as though the amateur shield is depreciating. I personally believe that it's a good thing. Would you agree that it's a good thing, or would you agree that there's still some form of amateurism or semi-pro type of argument to have here?
I mean, the devil is so in the details in that. It's such a hard question to answer, because like at the end of the day, I hope most, if not all of us, agree that this athletic experience should be tied to the academic experience. And I know there's always going to be an argument for that top 5% that the media is going to devalue that academic experience, but I just don't know how you can devalue the academic experience. It's tied to the fanhood. We just talked about it, right? Like, the fact that it's tied to the university and tied to the academic experience is why our fans are so invested. It's why it changes the college community. So, I mean, is it amateurism? Is it not amateurism because now they're getting paid for their name, image, and likeness and for their broadcasting rights? So I don't know if that part matters. You know what I mean? To me, it's like, I'm more worried about the model and the function. I'm an internal problem solver, right? I let the external marketing people figure out that part. But like, to me, I less worry about like, is it amateurism and is it not? And more worried about, in 10 years, how do these students still earn what they're deserved while also continuing to value the academic experience? I don't care what you call it, whether it's amateurism, semi-pro. How do we just keep this train moving and keep tying it to the academic experience? Like I don't really get involved in the, do we want to still call it amateurism? I focus on tethering it to the academic experience, but providing the student athletes the experience they deserve and the financial means that they deserve. And that, to me, is where we have to focus on, as opposed to like the 100 years of NCAA amateurism that they've like stood on. Like, that's okay. Models change, businesses evolve, communities evolve. Like, if we lose the amateurism, does it matter if we're still tied to the academics? Maybe not. And so I let the ESPN analyst do that one.
Yeah, speaking of, I'm just curious, speaking of like compensation, how do you ensure that these athletes are being fairly compensated, especially because, with women athletes, there's also always this disparity. So how do you ensure that the athletes are being paid and compensated adequately?
Right now, there's two compensation models. The House settlement that was approved last year provided institutions to pay directly. So, for example, this year, $20.5 million, that's all tied to like an average of what revenue comes into, the Power 4, Power 5 schools. So this year it's 20.5, next year it'll grow to 21.3. So that's one stage, right? That is the market that we don't create, but that we have a little bit more control over, because those are institutional funds paying the student athletes for their like NIL kind of licensing fees. The second is that third party NIL, right? So a little bit less control, because those are brands coming in and people coming in and that value. And so you have to decide, well, first, which one are we talking about? Are we talking about institutional NIL licensing, or are we talking about third party NIL? Institutional NIL, we took a real strategy approach. We brought in campus partners. We looked at a lot of data. We looked at what the revenue looks like for each sport. We wanted to value our women's Olympic sports and our women's basketball teams. We made sure they were a part of revenue share. That's kind of like the bread and butter of how we work. So I won't get too much into that. But I mean, we spent 6 or 9 months fully looking at how we're going to split up that 20.5 million. And we did not do it in a vacuum. The chancellor was involved. Our GC was involved. Our student affairs was involved. Like, we put it together and we said, hey, these are the percentages we want to do. These are the sports we want to provide. And, it wasn't just me and our AD on my whiteboard back here being like, let's get football exit. It was is extremely thoughtful and strategic. And you're right, like when you start going down, 2025 gets smaller than you would think it gets, right? And because you got to be competitive in your revenue sports, but you also want to provide, other sports, specifically your women's Olympic sports, a little bit of value. And it's difficult at UCLA. We have a national champion soccer team, a national champion softball team. We have a national champion gymnastics team. Like we have 3 or 4 women's Olympic sports that compete at the highest level. And so we have to value them, and we do value them. And so we did that, and by providing them some of that rep share as well.
Yeah, I know it's hard to, when it's a third parties, that's where it gets tricky because you don't have a lot of control over that. But that's good that it seems like there's a detailed process. You said 6 to 9 months of really figuring out like how to actually compensate them.
The third party is great because let me tell you, our women's sports crush it in the third party NIL because they know how to create content. They value social media. Brands want to work with them. Like we said, like marketing dollars are just being influxed into social media marketing campaigns. And our female student athletes excel at that. They just do that. It's more authentic for them. It's more natural for them. We have very large female athlete brands at UCLA. And so our female athletes do really well in third party NIL. And, I got brands every day calling like, hey, can we get X, Y, and Z from, those 3 female teams? And they're doing really well. They're very easy to market, especially like at UCLA with some of the brands and the student athletes we have. So it's pretty fun to watch them. Like the third party NIL is where it gets fun because it's just real authentic content where they just get to like kind of create their own little marketing plans, their own big, massive marketing plans with these brands. So we push our female student athletes heavily in our third party NIL.
I'm assuming it does work with agencies as well, right? Big talent agencies.
Argue, collaborate, negotiate.
That must be fun. As far as I wanted to talk about the athletes. They have the freedom to, transfer pretty much every year. Now with the executive order, it might change some things a little bit, but it wouldn't. I know at UCLA, it probably wouldn't factor in. It wouldn't matter as much because we will still be successful regardless, and I'm confident in that in all aspects or in all sports. But I wonder, do you think the executive order can help benefit the small or mid-major schools that may not have the success that we have here at UCLA?
It can't be understated. A massive part of NIL that happened at the exact same time was the deregulation of the transfer rules. In 2021, we got the 2 most impactful legislative changes in the NCAA. The same June, July, we got NIL, which has never been permitted. So you influx more funds to the market, and then you got unlimited transfers, all within the same 2 months. So you got funds plus open market. We've never had that. I mean, in football and basketball, you always had to sit. And in all your other sports, you were only given 1. And so the fact that we had those 2 things colliding in the same month is it imploded our system, for lack of better words, right? Like you had, it wasn't just one large thing, it was 2. So now you have this ability to transfer every year, and it's basically reset your market every year. And so when those 2 things happened, that's when we were just like, oh, wow, like we didn't just change one massive thing, we changed 2. And that's really, to me, the catalyst of what we've been trying to regulate and catch up for the last 4 or 5 years, because those 2 things happened. There's a ton of data, right? The more you transfer, the more units you lose, the farther away you are from graduation. So that's one. Like, that's just the reality, right? Like, it just is what it is. The more you transfer, you're going to lose units. And then now, instead of being 40 units away from graduation, you're 60. So what that does to the graduation rate to these student athletes, it matters. It really does. But there's really good arguments for the ability for free transfer too, right? And so I think maybe it's somewhere in the middle of the executive order. The president's executive order discusses it, and he looks at this going back to the model of the one-time transfer, and that may help. And I think there's a lot of strong arguments for that make that really positive. I think just seeing it, it's, we talk about a lot putting the toothpaste back in the tube. is pretty difficult. So it's all about what's going to be able to hold up. Like, is this going to be fought in court? Is state or federal going to look at this and be like, hey, you're restraining free movement? That's the part that we gotta kind of lean in and understand more of. But there's no doubt. I mean, if I'm a proponent of tying this to the academic experience. And so it is hard for me to see a student leave and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're 10 units away from graduating. Don't leave, I've started my career as an academic counselor and compliance person. So I'm a academic compliance nerd at heart. So like when I see a student leave and I'm like, you're 2 quarters away, you got to stay. But I get it, they may have a better opportunity. And now that opportunity is not just tied to their athletic playing time. It's tied to 6-7 figures. And so that's where we're just doing this. And so I tie it more to that and what it looks like for graduation rates. And, graduation rates are on like a 5-year scale. So we really won't see the impact of 21 to 25 and for another about 3 years. But it'll be really interesting to see what those graduation rates look like from that first, I'd say that 22 to 25 academic year range, to see how low, if they really dipped or were students able to finish. Like it's just a delayed data set.
And I know you have to go soon. But I have one final question for you. And speaking of which, looking into the future, if you were to mandate one specific skill that every student athlete should possess by the year, I don't know, 2030, what would it be?
It's social media brand strategy. It really is. Like it's just, it defines you. It's your resume. It's going to help you get a job. It's going to lead you into a financial resource that you may not see. I mean, preparing our student athletes for what comes after this sport is huge. So like the career development, the student athlete development, putting them in the community, like we're never going to get away from that. But our world is so on our phones. It's so on our entertainment. It's so on our social. How you present yourself matters. Like, Janice talked about this earlier. It was her first question. It was, how do you teach them how to present themselves in a manner that, is tight and buttoned up enough to sell yourself. And so while we at UCLA, at least in our NIL strategy, we believe your social is your brand, it's your resume, it's your LinkedIn, it's what's going to prepare you. And it's also going to provide you instant financial opportunity. So I think that's what we're just going to focus on. If you're telling me 2030, that's soon, man. That's the next 4 or 5 years. And we're leaning into LA 28 and the Olympics. Like we are pushing brand integrity, brand strategy. Who are you and how are you presenting yourself to the world? Like our women's basketball team took over the country. And I really believe those young ladies, those 6 seniors are social media like maniacs. Like the way they post and they authenticate themselves. Like the amount of people that are like, I love following Gabs on Twitter. I can't believe, like on social, like their story expanded because of the way they present themselves on social and the opportunities that they let fans into their journey, and especially this year. And so for me, like that's what we're going to focus on in the next 5 years. Like we want them to be the president of their own brand. And so we want to make sure we're giving them all the tools. And we're in LA. Like this is where influencers flock to LA because there's so much opportunity. So we're going to continue to maximize that. And, 2030, the motto could look really different. And then I'll, pivot. But for the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to be all in on their brands and presenting themselves to a world that creates their next job or their next financial opportunity through a marketing fund.
I actually think that that's great advice for any student, whether you're an athlete or not.
Yeah. I mean, it's like what I said, we were talking about it to them before NIL. Like, it's just so important. And like, I get it too. You don't want to put so much emphasis on social because there is a lot of negative side to it. And it's like, it's also, there's a lot of mental health awareness, resiliency that we have to teach them too. Like at the same time, I'm talking to our student athletes about, hey, like what's in your DMs? Like, our student athletes are getting threatened if they miss a free throw because of what's happening in sports gambling. Right. Mm-hmm. So like at the same time that I'm telling them to put themselves out there, I'm also trying to figure out ways to protect them from like online haters and robots that are just coming after them from the sports gambling world. So like the full education of that to also make sure that it doesn't impede their mental health and that it doesn't hurt their resiliency and they don't also live and die on the phone. Like it's a twofold strategy. Like how do we build like phone and social resiliency, but then how do we also maximize? And like, so some days I'm like, guys, like okay, maybe we put our phones down, like, let's not check our DMs, like, after a tough game. And, there's a ton of data. There's death threats. There's terrible things happening in our student athletes, DMs, as sports betting has been on the rise. So I also say that knowing we have to educate them on the mental toughness and resiliency to also put the phone down and not let that part impact their health and well-being. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword, social media, for sure. And so I did want to make sure I got that in there, that like the education goes both ways, how you present yourself, but how you protect yourself too.
We appreciate you so much for this lovely conversation, Erin.
It was so great to meet you.
Yeah, it was
Thank
awesome to meet
you.
you guys. I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the passion to understand our world a little bit more. Not a lot of people want to go under the hood and see what we're doing, and kind of just see your Jay Billis argument. So I appreciate you wanting to dive deeper to obviously a topic I'm highly passionate about.
Congratulations, Erin.
Yeah,
Thank you
we're
so much.
champs.
Yeah, we're champs. I'm proud of you guys. And as a faculty member here at UCLA, I'm so proud. I'm so proud.
Yeah, that's awesome. Our faculty are massively important to what we do, and we know that, and we're so thankful to be on a campus that understands that we can value both the academic and athletic experience.
Welcome back to the Academic Boardroom, a podcast where we sit down with power brokers shaping the future.
Mind of a scholar and a business-minded soul. We at the Academic Boardroom, yeah, we keeping it 100. If you're looking for the truth, well, you finally found it. Take a seat at the head, let the dialogue flow. It's the masterclass vibe.